Hello, it's such a pleasure to be here. And today I want to talk about future trends, opportunities, and challenges of artificial intelligence. First of all, I want to say thank you to Busan Metropolitan City and the Digital Shuzun for hosting and inviting me to be the keynote speaker at AWC 2021 in Busan. So I want to talk about the challenges, the trends and opportunities. And when you look at AI and how it has developed over the years, it really has come a hugely long way, and it keeps accelerating and new innovations are being developed all the time. So let's look at some of the key trends. And today, AI is doing amazing things and is enabling machines to do things like read and write and talk and even perform music, diagnose diseases, and even be creative. And they were all domains that previously only humans could do. We've now had AI for the last 50 years, but when it all started, we had what we call expert systems, where we had to give the AIs or the algorithms exact instructions of what to do with the data we were giving them and how to calculate it. So for me, a great example is automatic character recognition. So when you look at a letter, for example, the postal office has been using this for many years now, for over 20 years, that automatically reads the address labels on a letter. But this is pretty easy because you can think of this is an A, this is an O, this is an F. These are the different ways people write it. And then you can put a statistical number on it saying, I'm pretty certain this is an F, this is an A, and then you can put words together. And we've had this, as I said, for 50 years. What has changed since then is that we now have had other amazing innovations. The internet, for a start, and cloud computing that is now enabling us to store and process data in huge volumes. With the internet and cloud computing came the arrival of big data. We now have massive amounts of data in the world. The vast majority of all the data we now have were generated in the last 2 or 3 years. And today we have something in the region of 30 zettabytes of data in the world. If you then play forward to 2025, which is not that far away, predictions say that we will have something in the region of 125 or 175, in fact, zettabytes of data in the world. So this is unprecedented territory. We now have more data than ever before. Pretty much everything we do in our lives increasingly leaves a data trail. And contributing to this fact is the Internet of Things. So we now have more smart, intelligent systems and devices. We have smartphones, smart TVs, smart cars, smart everything. And this is enabling AIs to do something differently. They can now learn from data itself. And instead of telling them exactly what we want them to do, we can feed them with data, and these systems become self-learning, what we refer to as machine learning. And for me, this is a bit like how we teach our children to learn. So I remember sitting down with my 3 children, and then you go through picture books of animals and you say to them, okay, what is this? This is a cat, and this is an elephant. And after you've done this a few times, they learn. And today, machine learning algorithms do exactly the same. We feed them with data, and they will automatically learn to recognize animals on a photograph. So a really good example is Wild Me. This is a conservation project that is trying to track animals, especially endangered animals like whale sharks, for example. And what these systems do is if someone uploads a video or an image or photograph of a whale shark they have spotted, these systems will automatically recognize that this is a whale shark. But even more, it will recognize that this is a specific animal because zebras and whale sharks and different animals have different markings. So whale sharks have spots on their back, and they uniquely identify them in the same way that zebras have different stripes and uniquely identify them individually. And this now allows machine learning algorithms to automatically spot these whales from underwater cameras on pictures tourists have taken and track them over time to see how they migrate. So for me, this ability to learn from data has been illustrated by Deepmind in particular. So Deepmind is an AI company that trained AIs to play the board game Go. And their first way to train AIs was that they basically told the AI all the rules. They fed it with human data of all the different ways humans have played this game and have won it. So they looked at all recordings of previous games and then used this to train the AI. And this AI then very quickly became very good at it and actually beat the world Go champion Lee Sedol in a competition. What was interesting is what they then thought is, why do we start with training our AIs with data? How about we just train them with rules? And we run this as an unsupervised way of training AIs. So all we give them is rules of how to play the game, and then we let two AIs play against each other using reinforcement learning. And what transpired out of all of this process was that they were able to come up with a new algorithm that was far superior to the one that was trained by all the human knowledge. And even more interesting, what was interesting is that these systems became creative. So they came up with moves that have never been recorded in any human game previously. So for me, this is an illustration of how far we have come with AI today. We now can use data and use AIs to play against each other to become more intelligent. The future will not stop here. So we already have hugely amazing capabilities, but this will be accelerated and even reinforced by other new technologies. We talk about this metaverse where we have a merging of the digital and the real world using virtual reality and augmented reality. This is again enabled by AI, where it will become increasingly common that we basically go from the real world into the digital world and back. We also have now the role of 5G, so the fifth generation of mobile networks, and we are now currently working on 6G, which will even be more amazing. But 5G will give us connectivity when we are mobile, when we're walking around, that will be as good as fiber optic lines in our offices. And we have things like quantum computing. Quantum computing uses particular phenomenon that take place at a subatomic level, where particles can exist simultaneously in multiple states. So currently computing has to be sequential. Can either be 1 or 0, and then we have to go through all the different options to calculate an answer. With quantum computing, we can look at multiple results at the same time. And this basically means that we will accelerate computing power and make it about a millionth time or even hundreds of millions times faster than what we have in supercomputers today. There are other innovations on the horizon. We can now store data on DNA. So Harvard researchers have already done this. They've written DNA onto they've written data and taken it back on a strand of DNA. And this means a teaspoonful of DNA could easily hold all the data in the world we have today. So this hopefully gives you an indication that the huge advances we've done over the last 50 years will only accelerate with all of these amazing technologies. So I thought it would be useful to look at some of my favorite use cases that really illustrate the power of AI. And for me, one that is very important today is that we wouldn't be as a world where we are today without COVID vaccines. And we would not have any of those vaccines without the use of machine learning and AI that sped up the development of these vaccines. We now have more autonomous vehicles, devices, so AI gives us autonomy in cars. Tesla recently released the level 2 update to all of their cars that have the autopilot update option built in, which means that these cars can do pretty much everything we need in day-to-day driving completely autonomously. And the Chinese company Baidu launched the first autonomous robo-taxi service back in Shenzhen. We also have things like Apollo Go, that is this taxi service, but also drones. There's a Chinese company called Yihang. They now produce completely self-driving passenger drones. Another example is Volocopter. This is a European startup backed by Daimler. And both of these organizations now have these really impressive drones. And their idea is that you simply call them a bit like you would call a ride-sharing service, a taxi, where you say, okay, I'm here, I would like a drone to pick me up. The drone would arrive, you get into it, and it will take you wherever you need to go. So we have these increasingly autonomous vehicles, including ships. We've seen this year the launch of the Mayflower autonomous ship that will attempt to cross the ocean. It will start from the UK, from Plymouth, and it will go to Boston in the US, completely autonomously. And we'll do this by machine vision, by edge computing and cloud computing on its ship. And one of my favorite examples is actually a robotic fruit picking robot that picks strawberries, for example. And even maybe 5 years ago, I used fruit picking as an example where I said, okay, this is where robots and AIs will not get to in anywhere in the short term. Because you need to, if you think about what goes into this idea of picking fruit and finding strawberries, so you need to look through the bush, you need to find the strawberry, you then need to determine, is it ripe enough to pick? You then need to be very careful to pick it without squeezing it too much and hurting the fruit. And I thought actually robots are not there yet. They can't really see, they can't distinguish between ripe fruits and unripe fruits, and they haven't really got the dexterity to pick up strawberries really carefully. Nowadays, we already have a commercially available strawberry picking robot that operates 24 hours a day and is very effective at picking the right strawberries, picking them up very gently and placing them in a punnet for harvest. Another example for me is to showcase where AI now is today is a supermodel that doesn't actually exist. Her name is Shudu, and she has more Instagram followers than I have, and lots of people wouldn't even know that she doesn't exist, but her entire image is AI generated. And this, for me, brings us to the future of fashion and the future of retail to some extent. One of the examples I've recently written about is the French company Bolly. They make really cool glasses, sunglasses and skiing goggles. And what they have now done is they have used artificial intelligence to produce a new lens. So this is the first AI-generated or AI-designed lens. They went through lots of different design options using AI to come up with the most innovative and best lens. And then they're now using augmented reality to help customers try those glasses on. This is again enabled by AI. So it works a bit like a Snapchat filter. You simply take your smartphone, you look at yourself, you then press a button and it will then overlay an image of the glasses. So when you look at your selfie camera, you can see what you will look like with those glasses on. But they've gone a step further. They also enable you to now see what the world will look like when you look through these lenses. So you can then flick your camera around, you can look at the world around it, and again, with AI, it will overlay the shading those glasses will provide you to see what the world will look like. So for me, they are all amazing innovations that highlight where we are today. And I'm actually in the process of creating my own digital avatar. I've used software called Descript for some time to help me transcribe my own words, for example. And now Descript and another company called Synthesia are now working together. So Synthesia is there to help me create a digital video image of myself. Descript can create a digital voice for myself. Combining those two now enables me to create a digital avatar. So we have done that, and I can now give this system any text, any of my articles that I write, and it will automatically turn this into a video using a synthetic image of myself and a synthetic voice of myself. But AI now goes beyond some of these things. We can now use AI to help machines smell and even taste. A French company called Aribol is now teaching AIs and sensors to smell, and they're trying to codify lots of different smells. And I've recently written about a company called Tastetree that is developing taste profiles, which can then be used, for example, in the wine industry. So wine is a very subjective topic when you think about you're trying to rate wines and you try to detect flavors, and you give one glass of wine to one person and they would say completely different things, describe it differently, because our taste profiles are all completely different as human beings. And depends on our experience and the profile of our mouth and the chemical composition of ourselves. So we all taste things completely differently. What this allows us to do is to objectify this a little bit and say, okay, these are the wines and tasting profiles that people with these tastes really like. So the idea is that you then have an app that gives you exactly a recommendation based on your taste profile. So you say, I really like this food, I like these wines, and it can then recommend others to you. And also wine companies are now using this. Another example along the similar lines is whiskey manufacturer Marr. They are a Swedish whiskey maker, and they have used AI to generate the first AI-enabled whiskey. So they used lots of different options, saying, okay, these are the different casks we have available, the different flavorings of our barrels, and this is the stock we have. These are what people actually liked and disliked, and then we combine all of this to come out with a few options. And their whiskey called Intelligence has been one of the very successful whiskies of recent years. Another really amazing example that I often talk about is GPT-3. This is a new AI developed by OpenAI, and they are really good at convincing natural language systems. So they are able to generate voice, they're able to read documents, they can read the entire content of Wikipedia and understand it and use it, and they can write summaries of things automatically. And they are even able now to automatically generate computer code. So this means, in theory, it can be used to create computer software programs by itself. So this hopefully gives you a flavor of where we are nowadays with AI at the leading edge. And for me, this takes me to the second part of my presentation, where I want to talk about the opportunities. And hopefully, with all of this, you realize that AI is an opportunity for every single business. But what we must do is we must approach AI strategically. And for me, every business now needs to look at their own business and think about the two aspects of what they do. They need to think about the customer side, where they rethink their products and services and build AI and AI capabilities into those services and products. And they need to look inside their own organization to think about, how do we run our organization? Can we use AI to automate things? Can we use AI to improve internal efficiency and effectiveness? So let's look at some examples. When you rethink your products and services, for me, great examples are Netflix or Spotify, for example. Both of those companies have massive amounts of user data, and they use this data very effectively to understand what you watch on Netflix, what you listen to on Spotify, and then they can make recommendations. Spotify automatically creates new playlists for you. Netflix now makes recommendations of films you might want to watch and TV shows you might like. And interestingly, over 90% of what we watch on Netflix is now driven by their AI-enabled recommendation engine. But they're also using AI for so many other things. They're now even customizing the images they're showing us. So if they know that you really like Robert De Niro, but Robert De Niro played a minor role in one of those films, and he isn't necessarily on the main poster, the AI can automatically pick a scene from this movie that has Robert De Niro in it to make it more relevant to you, so you immediately recognize, okay, this is a film I might like. But it's not just services not like Netflix and Spotify, it's also products. I talked about the Internet of Things making our products smarter and more intelligent. I can now think of not one single product that couldn't benefit from AI enablement. One example I often talk about is a toothbrush. So my kids use the Braun toothbrush that is enabled with AI. So this toothbrush monitors using sensors exactly how well you've brushed your teeth, and using AI to then determine this. And for example, when my kids were younger and I regularly checked their brushing, I could then simply go to the app saying these are the bits of the mouth they have brushed well, and I could then concentrate on those bits that they haven't brushed so well. Now we have smart yoga mats, smart coffee machines, and of course smart cars that I've already covered. Another good example is Siemens or GE, General Electrics. They both produce CT scanners, so used in hospitals to perform scans and X-rays. And these machines now come with intelligence. So in the past, all they did was take a scan of our bodies, our organs, and then those scans would be provided to doctors and radiographers to analyze. Nowadays, those machines come with intelligence that can automatically identify precancerous cells, very often more accurately than even the best oncologists could do. They can detect broken bones. They can analyze the entire CT scan of a body to identify areas that don't look right. So these are, for me, examples that every company now has to really carefully look at their products and services and reflect on how they use AI to stay competitive and go ahead of their competitors. The other area we need to look at is rethinking of how we run our business. And I talked about autonomous vehicles and drones, and farming is a great example. A company called John Deere is producing smart tractors, drones to monitor farming, and farming in the future will be completely, or to a massive extent, automated, using self-driving tractors, using completely autonomous harvesting machines. The monitoring of crop conditions will take place by drones that will monitor, and sensors that will take information from the soil. I'm a big fan of tennis, and I've been to Wimbledon this year. It was so nice to be back there. And I've worked with IBM for many years on looking behind the scenes of how Wimbledon is now using artificial intelligence. And basically, they have gradually improved their data and AI capabilities. And nowadays, their core product is completely autonomously generated. And their core product is a 2-minute match summary. And they're now using data from tennis courts, from embedded sensors, from cameras, from little microphones that even monitor the audience reactions. And based on all of this data, on video data, sound data, sensor data, the system will automatically produce a highlight summary. within seconds after the game finishes, completely autonomously. Companies like Unilever now use AI to automate parts of their recruitment process. So Unilever gets over 1 million job applications a year. And so this is a huge undertaking to read all of them, to process them, to shortlist candidates, to interview them, to take them to assessment centers, and so on. And they also felt that this was quite biased. So they wanted to make this less biased and more automated. So what they're now doing is, especially for their high potential track, they're using AI in this process. So when you submit your job application, an AI will read your job application. It will then invite you to a job interview, and everyone will get one. But the job interview is done over your phone. On the other side of your phone will sit an AI that will ask questions, understand your responses, but also analyze your body language and tone of voice and other things that a good recruiter would look at. And then you're invited to play a few games. So they identified certain skills. So one of the skills was risk-taking, your risk appetite. So they developed a game where you basically blow up a little balloon virtually and see how far you take it. Are you a really big risk taker that almost blows the balloon up, or actually blows it up, or do you stop really, really early on? So they have about 15 games or so that you play that look at different skills. And based on all of this, they will then shortlist candidates that will be seen by real people. But they have, by introducing this, saved thousands and thousands of hours of HR time. What was interesting is that when they asked candidates about this experience, they said that this has actually made their application experience better and more positive, because the AI can also give every applicant some real feedback saying, we didn't select you because of this and this and this. And this simply wasn't possible before, when people were simply overloaded by the amount of applications they needed to process. So for me, these two things, looking at how you offer better products, more intelligent products, and how you rethink your business and use AI internally, is really important. For me, what you can do is you can use AI, and I think our real opportunity is that we use AI to address some of the biggest challenges we have in the world. If you think about inequality in things like education or health, where the vast majority of people around the world haven't got access to the best healthcare, they haven't got access to education. AI will be a huge enabler of all of this, where if you think about an AI app that you can run on your phone that can diagnose, let's say, skin conditions. This is already there. These applications are more accurate than what doctors would diagnose. And you can simply roll them out across the world and give everyone anywhere in the world access to these tools, so they have access to better healthcare. We now have education systems that enable us to not only give education to everyone, but customize it, make it better. Another key challenge around the world is hunger. I talked about farming. I actually believe that some of the biggest innovations will come from the intersection of artificial intelligence and biology, where we will be better able to understand human DNA. We will be able to customize and edit DNA of plants, for example, to make them drought resistant. So countries that are in Africa that haven't got enough water are able to feed themselves and grow crops that are resistant to pests, resistant to droughts and other things. And of course, one of the biggest challenges we face as the world is climate change and sustainability. And again, AI can play a key role in all of this, in in optimizing how we use energy and generate it and distribute it across the world, optimize and reduce the energy consumption. For me, there are obviously huge challenges, so sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming. How do we actually start this process? How do we kickstart our AI process in our own organizations? And for me, there are a number of key challenges that every company needs to address. They are skills, technology, and some of the ethical concerns around AI. So I said I would talk about the challenges. So this is the third part of my keynote here. The first challenge, skills. I don't think I've ever walked into an organization that had enough skills, enough data literacy, enough people that understand and are able to use AI and leverage AI. So there's a huge talent gap at the moment. This is being filled, but it's a real challenge for organizations. If you are a tiny little company in retail, for example, and job applicants with really good AI skills have the choice to work for you or work for companies like Amazon or Microsoft or Alibaba, you have to entice them in. So it's really important to develop partnerships with suppliers, partnerships with universities to access some of this talent. And it's really important to develop your own talent. There's a real danger for me if you outsource all your AI will become so strategically important to every business on the planet that if you simply outsource it, you run the risk of outsourcing some of your core competencies or the things that you will compete on in the future. So we all need to develop and train our AIs. And this has to start right at the top of the organization, where we look at our leaders and their awareness of AI, and we need to bring this right across the organization to make everyone aware of what AI can do so they can spot opportunity and challenge existing business models and business processes. And we need to develop the real expertise in AI and machine learning so we can turn some of these new ideas into practice. The second challenge is technology. And what I see is that digital native companies that have started recently, they are usually cloud native, so have all technology in the cloud. They tend to outperform more established companies that have invested in big legacy systems over the last 10, 20 years. And this is what's holding many of the big blue chip companies and the more traditional companies back at the moment. So they need to accelerate the transition to the cloud, because once you have all of your systems in the cloud, you can then also access artificial intelligence as a service. So think if you have all your accounting systems in the cloud, you have all your security systems in the cloud, you have all your core business processes in the cloud, you can then say, okay, I would like to use AI to monitor security. You can simply switch this on. If you said, okay, I have all my customer transactions in the cloud, I would like to switch on recommendation engines that are based on what Amazon is using. And Amazon is a great example. They now rent access to the same recommendation engines that they are using themselves in their Amazon system to recommend products and services to their customers. So you can simply switch this on and use the same algorithm. So this will democratize access to AI. So if you want to access natural language processing, machine vision technology, and other key AI technologies, they are there at a push of a button once you are in the cloud, once you have the right infrastructure in place, once you're able to store and harvest all of your data. My third challenge is ethics. And there are many challenges here. We have challenges around collecting data. There are privacy challenges. We need to make sure the data is kept private. And there are sometimes consent challenges as well. We often assume that all our users are adults that have given us consent to collect their data and use it in whatever way we would like. There's now increasing regulation around the world to stop companies just simply exploiting user data. But for example, if you think about Mattel, the toy company, they released an AI-enabled Barbie that is able to have conversations with your children. And if you then think, okay, there's a real challenge here because my child isn't really able to give consent. Do they really understand that this is an AI that collects and processes all your child's data in the background? So there are real challenges here. There are also challenges around biases. They come in things like filter bubbles. So if you use an AI-enabled news tool, like most of us today, that give you information, they will learn what you like and they will give you more of it, which very quickly creates these what we call filter bubbles. So if you are left-wing or right-wing in politics, it will give you more of it. And then suddenly you think the entire world is like this, which causes problems. AIs can also be discriminatory in terms of gender and race, for example. And this is another challenge. So we need to make sure that these systems work. And ideally, we have explainable AI that allows us to really understand how the AI is making decisions so we can track this. And some of the AIs today are still a bit of a black box. And then there are control problems with AI. So if we use cars that can automatically drive, how do they make decisions? If they have a choice between avoiding a pedestrian and killing or potentially not killing the pedestrian, but potentially killing the occupant in the car, how do these systems make some of those trade-off decisions? Sometimes we think we have a human in the loop, but some of these systems, if you think about cars, or autonomous weapons, or even trading platforms, they make decisions in a split second where there isn't really a human in the loop, so we have a control problem. And what I recommend organizations do is they create ethics councils. And for me, a really good starting point when you think about how do I approach AI in my organization is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development that has developed the OECD principles on AI. And they state that AI should benefit people and the planet, which is a great start. AI should be designed in a way that respects law, human rights, democratic values, and diversity. And there should be transparency so that people can understand and challenge AI-based outcomes. And AI must function in a robust, secure, and safe way with risks continuously being assessed and managed. And organizations developing AI should be held accountable for their proper functioning in line with these principles. So for me, this is a great starting point. That sets, for me, one of the best frameworks you can anchor your AI into. And the other, think about in really everything we do in our organization, but especially around AI, because it offers such an amazing opportunity for this world. I believe AI is the most powerful technology we've ever had access to. So shouldn't we bind it to the 17 UN sustainability goals? This is for me a great opportunity because we want to make our world a better place, a more sustainable place. We want to tackle some of the issues I talked about earlier, and those 17 UN goals really highlight these. So for me, this is a super exciting time. It is our opportunity to use AI to build the future we want to live in and tackle some of the world's biggest challenges, from climate change to health inequality, how we feed the world. And it enables us to create a fairer and more equal society and societies in the world in which humans can thrive and be happy. I hope this has given you some inspiration. The remaining presentations at this event are all amazing, so hopefully this has given you some stimulation and you will enjoy the rest of this conference. Thank you very much.